Massachusetts convicted prison inmate Esteban was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of a policeman in 2005. When Providence police were questioning him for stabbing an 85-year-old woman, a detective had left the room to get a drink of water for Esteban. This left him alone in the room with Police Detective Sergeant James L. Allen. Once the detective had left the room, Esteban grabbed James's gun and shot him twice, resulting in his death. Esteban then jumped out the third-floor interview room window before being caught less than an hour later. Incredibly, Esteban was brought to his arraignment wearing a mask that was designed to stop offenders from biting or spitting on people. He also had red eyes, cheeks, and a red forehead, along with swelling around his forehead and cranial region.
Every day, I face the facts of what I did and what happened.
It wasn't so much his crazy reaction that shocked people, but that of his family. When he was sentenced to life in prison, his family screamed and yelled about police brutality. An FBI investigation concluded that excessive force had not been used given the circumstances, and that his injuries were sustained when he jumped from the third floor of the building and during his struggle with law enforcement. Rodriguez, who had just turned 18, was on parole when he robbed, kidnapped, and sexually assaulted a 25-year-old woman in Martin Luther King Jr. Park, dragging her 105 feet into a bathroom. Anthony had previous arrests for violence, but this appeared to be his first for sexual assault. According to reports, Anthony had been quiet throughout the entire ordeal, but that soon changed when the judge sentenced him to 25 years to life. He started directly talking to the judge with tears in his eyes, yelled profanities, and called the ruling unfair. He had to be forced to sit down.
Down, Mr. Rodriguez, down.
Anthony clearly wasn't happy with the outcome of the trial, and neither was his family. Afterward, his mother said that he didn't deserve life in prison and that something was wrong for him to receive such a heavy sentence. Anthony wasn't the first person to be arrested for the same crime. Previously, Mike Zarate Jacobo was under arrest on suspicion of rape and stayed in a downtown jail for 35 days until DNA evidence cleared him. That DNA evidence instead linked 18-year-old Anthony Rodriguez to the crime. Smith Riley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2016 for shooting and killing Portia Brooks and severely injuring her boyfriend Aaron Martin during a robbery. Portia and Aaron were sitting in a parked car in Norwood when Jaleel approached the vehicle with two others and ordered Aaron to get out. When Jaleel discovered that he had nothing of value to take, he shot him in the head before leaning into the vehicle and shooting Portia as well. A Crime Stoppers tip led the police to Jaleel, who was charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder, aggravated robbery, and 2 counts of felonious assault. To avoid the death penalty, he pleaded guilty and faced a sentence of life without parole. When he was sitting in the gallery, Portia's family spoke to the court and Jaleel. Jaleel then had to try and convince the court that he deserved leniency. He started crying in court with tears rolling down his face. He said, "I just want to come home one day."
I just want to come home one day.
His attorney stepped in and said Jaleel was someone who felt genuine remorse and thought about what he did every day. He said he couldn't undo what he did. The judge had the final word and sentenced Jaleel to life without parole. As soon as those words came out of his mouth, Jaleel fell to the floor, crying. Someone tells you that they've lost their only child, their son, their baby, and their friend. It's only natural for you to feel sadness. You might also feel a great deal of remorse if you're the reason why someone isn't alive. But when a victim impact statement was read out to the court and the person responsible for murdering 18-year-old Jordan Clee, the court was in shock. The defendant, 17-year-old Danta Wright, who was sentenced to 23 to 50 years in prison, smiled and nearly laughed. When his lawyer attempted to say that his client said it was never his intention to injure, Danta interrupted him to address the court himself. You might think that at this point he might express remorse from the heart, but that is not what happened at all. Instead, he smiled as he said, "I just want to tell y'all I'll be home soon. I love my family."
Tell y'all I'll be home soon. R.I.P. Keon, I love my family.
This definitely wasn't well received by most people in the courtroom. The judge asked prosecutors if the sentencing agreement was too merciful. He followed up by saying that watching Dana sit there, smiling, laughing, and shaking his head like it was no big deal, he was tempted to say he wasn't going to accept the sentencing agreement and take the case to trial. If convicted of felony murder, that would mean Danta would be in prison for the rest of his life. That means you'll die there. That's what I'm tempted to do, the judge said. Danta was charged with possession of a weapon during a violent crime along with murder, he acted in a way that surely made the people around him think he was gonna crack at any minute. Not only was he clenching his fist, but he was also making strange sounds, shaking his head, and standing before the judge with his teeth bared for the entire time that she was describing how things were gonna play out. The judge also tried to ask the man questions, but he wouldn't answer all of them consistently.
Do you answer my questions?
When she asked whether he'd like to be screened for a court-appointed lawyer or whether he could hire his own, he didn't answer immediately. He then proceeded to ask the judge whether he looked like he could afford one, and then said he didn't need one. It's not known what the outcome of this case was, but even during the early stages of his case, his reactions were absolutely terrifying. When the video was uploaded to the internet, many people were quick to point out that the man was likely trying to act insane so that he could enter an insanity plea. We're not sure of the case's outcome, but you're surely interested to know whether he managed to keep up this look.